Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Transformation. I'm Susie Lewis, your host, and today's conversation is about the gap that we are all struggling with. The gap between how fast AI moves and how fast humans actually change. We're going to explore that gap, what it means for individual leaders, for teams, and for organizations as a whole. My guest today has spent 20 years inside that gap, actively experimenting with fixing it. Ryan Drumheller is a fractional CIO and the founder of Stellarhorn Group, and he's the guy companies call when their AI rollout has quietly become a bit of a mess. Bad data, no governance, a Copilot license nobody trained anyone to use, etc., etc. He also hosts his own podcast called Decline Invite, so he knows exactly what it's like to sit where I'm sitting right now. Ryan, welcome to Let's Talk Transformation.
Thank you for the warm intro, and I look forward to having this convo and having a good time.
Yeah, me too. And what I really love about your approach, Ryan, is that you have zero patience for what I call shiny object syndrome. So, you're not anti-AI, but you are anti-pretending that it will fix everything. And today I'd love to talk about what happens when we strip that hype away, Ryan. So what AI adoption actually requires, why the human in the loop, which I hear everywhere, is a phrase everyone uses and almost nobody defines. Hold that thought. And why most AI problems are not really technology problems. So can we start with your journey and the idea of a fractional CIO? How did you get there, Ryan? And what does it mean?
Yeah, no, I've ironically had to relive this journey very recently as I'm writing that journey in a book currently.
Oh, really?
So it's
Okay,
very fresh in my mind.
great. You can
uh,
share it with us then.
yeah. So it probably started as a kid, honestly,
Mm.
why I even got into IT. As a kid with ADHD, I always wished I could get into some kind of world. And I really wish I could have draw. I can't draw. So I think that helped push me towards IT as a world where I could try to kind of get immersed in. And then just naturally, as I went along, it became evident that I'm maybe not the classic IT personality. I'm a bit more extroverted. I like to
Mm.
talk to people. I like technology, but I understand that the people you need and they come first before the technology. And if you do it the other way around, you classically find some of the conversations we're going to probably get into there. So that led me along my path into leadership. I've been in leadership for about 13 years now. I've done everything under the sun. My last corporate role was actually a company out of the UK, the biggest software company in the UK at the time. I oversaw all of North America for them. Being a US citizen over here, it was a fantastic role, which led me into why I got into consulting first and then fractional. My role was eliminated early in the AI wave and the economy changing, especially in the US and now the world that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
I got caught up in that. So I actually started a consulting company with a couple founders. I left that about a year after we founded it and found myself going, what should I do? And I went, well, the idea of what we were doing was great. Let me just do that as a solo preneur at that point. So I made a fractional decision
Mm.
and I have to practice what I preach or people eliminate me. And, you know, that's kind of how I got into the fractional gig and why people bring me in to help solve right now a lot of the AI issues.
And I love the idea of fractional being about making yourself dispensable as opposed to indispensable. But what does that allow you to do in terms of how you service the client around AI? Because tell me what you see around AI rollouts and what the fact that you are fractional allows you to do, Ryan.
Yeah, let's be brutally honest. Different from a consultancy, I have the conversation very much upfront of, here is where you guys are at. I assume you're bringing me in, you're contacting me for a reason at this point. And most of the time, it's typically one of two things. They've either tried themselves and they've
Mm.
stalled in some kind of way, or they have no idea how to even start. Those are two typical things that I see. And then we start peeling back the onion layers to kind of figure out where they're at and what's going on. And I think one thing that AI has kind of exposed, especially for businesses, and it probably makes a lot of sense, that AI moves very quickly. Businesses do not.
No, no.
So they kind of get caught up in having to make decisions faster than they normally would. And something I would always advocate for is making quicker decisions, but
Yeah, of course.
businesses typically don't, and they have to. Or the things I typically see is they don't even have a project plan. They haven't identified what the quick wins are. What are the things that we can automate that we don't want to have a person hitting a button 250 times a day? And what the long-term journey is like, where is it that you want to actually go with AI?
Mm,
It seems like with AI right now, people are kind of forgetting the basics. Where we wouldn't invest in these things if we didn't have a real plan. And as a business person, you wouldn't invest in something that's red, negative return. What are we doing? Like, let's make sure that we have the plan. We maybe measure that. We have like what we are seeing as a positive return on that. And then comes some of the other pieces you're asking about with like the AI adoption. So that's really like the pre-work I would call it, like AI adoption is like make sure you get to that level, because once you get to that, then we can talk about how we're going to adopt this into your environment. And I've heard all kinds of things like businesses where their competitors have, some kind of AI. And I tell them, I don't really care. I don't know how it was implemented, what they've done over there. What I do care about is what you guys want to do with it,
mm.
what you're going to do with it. How are we going to set up that governance, that security, the training, and then select tools? Tools are at the end for me. They're never at the beginning.
No.
I'm typically a surprise for most businesses because we go backwards before we go forwards.
Yeah, which is where they haven't been before. I mean, if I take your two entry points, Ryan, one is sort of like not started at all. So there's like a whole onion on the table and you have to really start peeling it all the way. One is we've sort of deployed stuff, but it's not really working. But I'm hearing that both things go back to what reminds me of digital transformation 10 years ago. It was a shiny object. We had to do it. We hired data scientists. We put them somewhere. And then we thought about the business plan. We didn't look at our data. We didn't look at governance, which brings me to the point of, is it the same thing as digital transformation 10 years ago? Is it just us humans reacting to that? And if so, what's your advice for people who are currently in either of those situations, deploying AI and not seeing what they thought they'd see, or thinking, right, we need to do something bigger with AI?
So I'll give you a good soundbite because it is of my opinion that most AI problems are human driven. AI at the end of the day is a tool
Yeah.
and you deploy it and use it however you want to deploy it and use it. But the decision making comes from the human. And that is where we're seeing a lot of the problems at this point. And then what we're talking about right now, yeah, I'm not inventing the wheel. It's nothing new, really. It's not really new until we start getting involved in the actual tooling and what we're going to do with it. But everything up to that is not really new. It goes back to basic,
Mm.
fundamental project management, making sure we have measurables, making sure that we have somebody assigned to each of these areas, making sure we're adopting it for your employee base and user base. I don't have a one size fits all. I have a size what works for your company
Yeah.
model. So we make these up as we go along. Like why I have those conversations. How is your employee base with adoption? What
Mm.
kind of things do they need in order to be comfortable, adopt, make sure they have a funnel that they can ask questions through. We're not just giving them PowerPoint presentations, or
Mm.
we're giving them real training that works for them, whatever that model might be.
Which would presuppose an understanding and clarity around what they're going to do with it and why. Do you find most of your interactions with leaders, particularly senior leaders, are in that zone of clarity? Or is it really about strategy and context before we even talk about upskilling and training?
Yeah, I think a lot of it right now is in the zone of like AI's been out there and they're either feeling behind or they're being mandated or it's really for the wrong reasons, I would say, or down the
Mm.
wrong paths. It tends to be from that standpoint. So then that's where we lead to kind of forgetting all of the things that we've done in every other project, or hopefully have done in every other
Yeah,
project
yeah, yeah.
along the way, because then they forget about that, right? They forget
Mm.
about the human element of your employee who also is reading about AI articles, also reading about employees losing their jobs, whether true or not. And in a lot of cases, I have some different opinions on what's really happening, but the employees are reading that stuff too. So if you're not interacting with
Mm.
them, there's somebody very close to me, for example, that works at a really big company, and their AI deployment was here's Claude, you're mandated to use it. Good luck.
Wow.
What is that? At the end
Wow.
of the day,
And how's that going, dare I ask?
you can guess how it's going,
Yeah,
right?
wow,
Like,
wow, that is crazy, Ryan.
the documentation that's coming out is like written for a developer, and it's like this person's a project manager. Like, you don't
Wow.
even understand at that, but you're telling the employee You don't even understand what they do. So there's bad ways to roll it out, right? They might have had good intentions sitting in a room at the end
Mm,
of the day and they're like, let's measure efficiency, but the communication, transparency, and education process just kind
mm,
of didn't produce the
mm,
way that they should have maybe thought about
mm.
that.
And I want to come back to your sort of comment on, my opinion on what's going on, and we'll go there in a minute. But before we do that, I want to pick back up on decision making and your opinion, Ryan, on whether that decision making is humans being humans and trying to avoid accountability, or is it this famous humans in the loop discussion, which for me is about understanding in an automated workflow with agentic AI or AI of any sort, where should the human be intervening, why, and what does it mean for the feedback loop? So, what are you actually seeing around decision making if we go down a level or two?
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit with that is it's not understanding like most of the understanding when I walk in the door typically is, oh, I thought AI would just take care of it. There's no human in the loop in that comment, right? And we have to go down an education process to explain why that doesn't happen, or explain what AI drift is like,
Mm,
or explain how I just sat overnight and typed in the same prompt 18 times, coaching my AI to do the thing that I wanted to do that is screwed up on 17 times, and why humans need to be involved in the actual process.
right.
You need to have an owner and you need to have accountability, or the disaster articles you do read about, those are why, because
Mm,
the human wasn't in the loop or in the right parts of the loop or completely no human at all. Those are the issues, and why those articles are coming up is
mm,
because of the accountability. They're not figuring out at what purpose and at what point do we have to put the human in. So we kind of go over those stages too, right? Like we want to make sure that human is responsible for every facet of that area. So that way when we have a question or where something goes wrong, we go, oh, Joe is in this area and Sally's over here for this particular area. And if I have a question about training, I know Bill is the person I go to talk to. And now you have accountability, but then you also have a feedback loop, so to speak, so that everybody in the process, all the way up to the top, can get the information that they need to have.
mm. So if I'm like a HR leader or a business leader sitting here listening, thinking, yeah, okay, now we've actually defined several use cases for AI on solid business plans and solid data. How do I go about doing exactly what we've just discussed? What part goes, I mean, some parts are obvious, others aren't. So, what would your advice be, Ryan, about how to go about leading myself and my team through an understanding of what we automate in the workflow and which outcomes and why?
Yeah, I think that goes all the way back to your AI governance team. Like your AI governance team should be setting what the requirements are for those projects and your must-haves, and the way that you as a business have adopted how you want to actually have those projects go. So if you have that framework and then you're taking it into a project, then you can make sure you're going, okay, we have to have somebody assigned to these areas of this project based off this framework. We don't have to come out of it with these kind of measurables. We have to come out of it with whatever the criteria might be. But you got to kind of go again, kind of go backwards and make sure you have the criteria to then
Mm,
pull into your project. Otherwise, naturally we're going to kind of get in that space where as a human, it's like, well, if I can get away with not being like,
yeah,
I've got my name on there, like we're good, right? At the end
yeah,
of the day,
yeah.
and somebody's name needs to be on there because somebody needs to actually be taking the responsibility and caring for making sure that we're checking these boxes, we're auditing, we're making sure these things are happening
Mm.
at the end of the day.
Which brings me to governance. And, what new roles are you seeing coming out, Ryan, in terms of exactly this question, where it goes next, how AI is governed, how the outcomes are, how we put guardrails in, and how the outcomes are governed, if you like.
Yes, I mean, you're seeing AI insure everything, like
Yeah, chief AI
whatever.
officers and AI orchestrators. And I'm just interested to see what you're seeing as trends in terms of governance roles that are sitting either at the C suite or at different levels of the organization.
Yeah, and I think that's a struggle point right
Mm,
now for businesses. And my advice to them is always do what works for your business. Like the truth and honesty is right now in tech, we're moving at the speed that we're able to move at, and AI is moving at the speed it's moving at. And we're doing this cat and mouse game back and forth here. and we're just trying to figure out the best kind of ways. There isn't necessarily a right or a wrong way to do things. There's a wrong way when we have the data points or the very obvious, like,
Mm.
okay, there's those points. But
Yeah, sure.
I would say the way that I always coach the business is let's find something that works for you guys. Is that going to bring the value that you want? What's the measurements that you want to actually compare this to? What is
Mm.
that role going to do for you? And as long as it's bringing value to the company that they feel like they're getting, name it whatever you want to name it at the end of the day. Make sure that they have the responsibilities so that those measurements can actually be met. But yeah, name it whatever you want. And whether that reports directly to C suite or it's a part of your governance process or it reports into wherever, you as a business have to decide ultimately who owns AI. Is it the business? Is it IT? And that is a hot potato thing right now, where I think like early this year, we've seen like just this huge investment into AI where we didn't have to worry about budget because nobody
Mm.
really kind of was assigned the line item for AI.
Mm.
And we're starting to get, to the back half of the year now where we're starting to see somebody needs to be accountable for this. Somebody needs to be producing measurables. Somebody needs to be producing the value, or we
Mm.
can't keep funneling money into AI if we're not getting that value in return. And that's kind of driving some of the decisions and questions that you're asking at this point,
Mm.
where we're starting to see what will become normal, I think.
Yeah. And are you seeing collective budgeting models, collective accountability around that or not? Given that AI is all pervasive, even though it's a tool, it's also all pervasive in how quickly and how efficiently it can lay itself on a landscape. Let's put it that way.
Not to the level of real collaboration.
Mm.
And again, I'm more favorable to the rule of thumb that somebody needs to be accountable for this. And if you have more than one area, then nobody's accountable
Yeah.
kind of mindset. And then that's not necessarily true. But right now, the understanding of even AI, and then we get to budget, and then we get to like, there's a lot of a learning curve
Mm.
that businesses are struggling with, and the catch up game with all of these decisions. They're just struggling mightily with that. And they're going down the wrong path, right? They're so worried about, the speed of AI and like, all we need to do is like, no, we need to go back to basics first. And if you do figure out, ultimately where you want the accountability to land, whether that's the business or IT or HR or whoever, then okay, let's give them the authority, but let's also put in the structure of how we funnel projects in and ultimately how all of that flows through the chain there, just like every other thing that's come before that.
Yeah. Yes. So basic project management, basic budget management, should I say? Can I just come
Yeah.
back to what you were alluding to, whatever is or isn't happening with AI? And you clearly have a view on that. Tell us a little bit more about what you think is actually happening with AI, what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if you look at some of these big companies and you're seeing the quote unquote mass layoffs or the excuses that AI is taking care of whatever, my opinion is that's complete BS. It might have impacted some of that, but you can't convince me that you found a way to eliminate 20,000 roles or 40,000 roles or whatever based off what I know that I'm doing with AI today
Mm.
or what I've seen a business do with AI. It's just not to that level yet. I think that there are some other things going on, and at the C-suite level, AI is a very convenient excuse at
Yeah.
the moment to be able to get behind some of these things. So I would say look at it from the medium to small business size level and see what's happening there. If those businesses are truly eliminating roles,
Yeah.
okay, maybe. But what I'm finding is that a lot of businesses that are willing to listen are finding reasons to repurpose their employees or
Yes.
find ways to say, hey, instead of eliminating this person's role, we could use better customer service over here for customer retention, or we could use monetary gains over here in marketing or sales
Mm.
or whatever it is, where now we're making more money on a return on our investment. Plus now that task is being automated or whatever it is
Mm.
because we didn't want a human, doing this minuscule thing for them,
Mm.
and not really getting job satisfaction at the end of the
Mm.
day.
Mm.
Those are the businesses that those aren't the good stories because quite honestly, those stories are at a smaller level. So the big scary numbers on that aren't as catastrophic as these huge consultancy firms or these massive companies that we're seeing that out of. But that That's the real story. And the businesses at mid-sized and small companies wouldn't be heavily investing in AI to that level and taking that risk because they would eliminate themselves if they got it wrong. And there's
Yeah.
enough stories where they've gotten it wrong that they wouldn't even be a business anymore. So that's
None.
my opinion and take.
Yeah, and yes, and I share that. I think I was very heartened the other day to see IKEA, which is a large corporation, replace 8,500 jobs with automated, but then they created a new business line. So in keeping with what you're saying, a more customer facing, because the more we get into chatbots and automation, the more we want to speak to people. I think it's so frustrating sometimes, although it can be efficient. And they've created a whole new business line out of that, which is exactly what you were pointing to in terms of the opportunities that AI can bring. But it also brings me to the idea of adoption. And you work with organizations at very different scales and sizes, like you just said. What changes about AI adoption once you go from, say, 200 people to, I don't know, 100,000 people? Is it essentially the same blueprint and it's just scaling in volume? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it depends. I'd say also depends on industry too. And it does come back to your employee base. And the larger you are, the harder it is. Like the
Of
company I was
course.
referring to earlier, that would take a massive coordination in
Yeah.
order to do that. But they're also not going to see the results that they're going to see, and they're going to make decisions based off, incomplete results, right? So it's much easier to do at a mid-size to small a level. You're probably knowing the names and the faces of a lot of the employees, or at least a lot of your leaders are at that point. So you're able to kind of craft and adopt and make something that's going to work for them. Whereas when you're getting to the larger corporations, like I'm looking at this sheet, I don't even know who 20,000 of these names are, right? And at that
Yeah.
point, you're making decisions hoping that they do adopt
Mm,
versus that you're making it for John and Bill and Sally and Sue is there's quite a difference. So the human element factor goes by the wayside the larger that you get. And that's just, I mean, that is just kind of the nature of the beast of working in a large corporation. It's much harder and it's much harder to move and make changes. I mean,
mm.
anybody who's been in a large corporation knows that the speed of that is a
I,
glacier. So
yes. Yeah.
it's a lot
Yeah.
harder.
Yeah. It's harder, and it's harder to drive that change, isn't it? If I come back to the leadership aspect. And for me, there is a sort of quiet cost that is also there that we don't talk about yet. And it's not an open discussion, which is leadership identity, Ryan. What it costs to no longer feel like you have your identity in the organization. And, you've moved out of an organization, you've set up an organization, you've moved out again, then become fractional. Can you tell us a little bit about the effect of that, positive or not, on your leadership identity?
I think I'm a little bit different when it comes to leadership. My opinion is leadership right now is lacking and it needs to be
Totally.
much better. There's an entire chapter about that in my book.
Okay, I'll wait
uh,
for that.
yeah, no. When it comes to like AI leadership, I think you're seeing a lot of things that we probably all seen, which somebody unfortunately falls on the short end of the stick and they get assigned the responsibility and they don't know what they're doing, or maybe they think they know what they're doing and they really don't. And you see all kinds of different things in that realm where again, it's kind of back to the basics again, that
Mm,
if we think about it from a human aspect and we go, okay, I have this goal that I need to accomplish with AI, but I also need to accommodate the human aspect along with it. One of the first things I do, for example, when I take a call, the very first call is typically almost always with leadership in some
mm,
form.
mm,
I almost always ask them about midway's point of, hey, you guys have really intelligent, like right hand people, employees and stuff that you hire for competitive advantages against your competitors, right? They're always like, "No, well, of course we do.
mm,
Perfect. Would you guys be opposed to including them?" Because from that standpoint, I already know that they're going to be the ones that are boots on the ground. They're the ones that are going to get the buy-in from everybody else. Like, oh, well, if John's involved. Well, I've been talking to John about my problems for 17 years or whatever it might
mm,
be. And then if they're involved with crafting these decisions and helping us with it, then leadership also hears that on top of that. So now they become more open, they are listening at that point,
mm,
and now we're driving to business success, right? Because we're building together and that makes buy-in much easier. All of these things, right? So that goes back to a leadership point, and I think they kind of panic when it comes to AI right now. And again, we kind of go back to that, forgetting some of the project stuff. They're forgetting some of the leadership elements too of what got you here as a leader at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And it might not get you there. If it got you here, it might not get you there.
And it's okay to admit that you don't know because truthfully, I'm going to be honest with you, nobody does. We're
Oh,
moving at the speed that we are able to, and we're learning at the same time. And AI models are coming out all the time, right? We just had the Fable thing with
yeah.
was Claude that was there, and then it was gone, and then
Now
apparently it's
it's back
coming
again.
back. And
Yes,
yeah,
apparently tomorrow it's back again.
yeah, and like I got in on it for a couple days, and I was like, "Oh, cool." And then I saw all the stuff that came out, and it's like, how could you possibly prepare as a leader to be able to answer those questions when you're watching it from
Yeah.
the side too? So like, you have to give yourself some grace and be okay to admit that you don't know. But we're gonna, that's why you bring somebody like me in and go, "Hey, what have you learned from multiple businesses, and then how can we adapt it to our business?" And now you are the smart individual as a leader from making that call to say, we want to try to get it as close to right as possible.
And that's a great segue into my question, which was, what would your practical tips be, Ryan, after everything you've seen and done for moving forward? What would, I'm going to call them strategic do's and strategic don'ts for leaders and employees looking to either roll out AI or manage AI?
The answer should be, what are your measurables and what is it that you want to accomplish? Because just rolling out AI should not be the answer. You don't have to have AI unless you have a reason to have AI. And I'm sure you can come up with reasons, but that should be where your mindset should be at the start of it, is figuring out what benefits are we going to do for this business by rolling out AI. So when you identify those reasons, then we can start talking about rolling out AI. And before that you even get to the point of implementing, yeah, you do have to go back to some of those earlier points. Make sure you are doing all the legwork and the basics to get up to that point. Because one of the worst things you can do is do what I like. You probably heard this term, bad data in, bad data out.
Yeah, yeah.
I improve upon it and go, envision holding a glass of mud, put the bad data in, and now you have a glass of mud. How many cups of water is it going to take now that you dump on that before it becomes drinkable again? So one of
It's,
the worst things you can do is put it in, and then now we've trained on it, and now we have to untangle that mess. And it's possible it'll never be as good as if we did it properly the first time, but those are some of the cautionary tales and some of the life lessons and everything that has to do with AI that, again, you wouldn't know unless you've done it or asked or got educated on. And that's where you got to be open also to raising your hand, doing a little bit of research, bringing in a consultant or a fractional person or whatever the situation is, and be unafraid to say you don't know. And I'm unafraid to tell you I don't know either. Like, give me some time, let me look it up, and we talk to some individuals, because we're all doing that all over the place right now because of the speed of AI and everything it all of a sudden can do on a random Tuesday when Fable comes back or whatever, right? Like, we're all scrambling to figure those things out.
and what's the biggest blind spot you're seeing at a C-suite level?
And so as a leader, if we think that leaders don't understand, the C-suite level is quite worse, because they'll be reading the headlines or somebody's telling them maybe something happened at this particular company. Why can't we do that here? It might not even be the model for that company to be able to do that very thing, right? So we're getting well, we need to implement AI orders, and then we're seeing the fallout of that because we didn't come with, okay, we want to actually roll it out in a way that makes sense for our business. Like, no, we want to have it by next quarter way. Well, then we get the rushed projects, we get the failed projects, we get the emails of, hey, you have this, use it, and you're on the customer's environment where they control all the data. Like, there's all kinds of unique situations you
Of course.
see across businesses where you can't just roll that out. And that's what we're seeing from, a CEO level or a board level, where they're being mandated from private equity or whatever
Yeah.
to get returns on value. And we're not actually having the conversation about what it means for that particular business and what things you can roll out and what things truly are going to be returns on your value. So those conversations aren't really taking place from my standpoint. It's just a, you have to do that or else statement.
Yeah. It's not even how they measure their value or what their value is. Yeah. So, Ryan, what's your vision is a big word. In the next 6 months, how do you see this playing out? New structures, new roles, or not? Yeah, what do you think is going to be the sort of trends that we see in organizations?
And this is another one where we're all guessing, right? I mean, there's some data, but at the same time, I would say there is going to be some job loss. There already has been. But I would also argue at the same time that the true job loss was that jobs that brought satisfaction, or was that opportunities to learn a new skill set or do something that does actually bring satisfaction. So I think AI is going to continue to expose and shine a light on some of those roles, but it's also going to do something that should bring a little bit of hope, which is it's going to create roles, because AI isn't necessarily going to replace people truly. It's going to create new roles where now maybe we're watching AI in this part of the business and we're overseeing it over here and we're working with AI. And that might be the difference. So you have to kind of be open to being adaptable and expanding your skill set, because this is not going to go away and it's going to create new roles just as much as it's going to take away some roles. But at the same time, we're seeing things already, right? We're seeing like the chief AI officer, we're seeing AI implementers, we're seeing AI everything insert here that makes sense for that particular
Mm.
business. And all that really is at the end of the day is it's what you always have done before, but now with AI. So the more that you're willing to experiment and learn with AI and learn how it works and it evolves and kind of does its thing, the knowledge you already had applies to that. And now you can make decisions and call yourself an AI whatever on top of that, and it'd be true at
Mm.
the end of the day. So I think you're going to kind of see that evolve just as much as we're still figuring out where does it end.
Yeah, exactly. I
I
know.
don't know where it ends yet, but I'm watching it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows that yet, do they? But
Right, right.
but what would your final call to action be for our listeners who are sat there thinking they've either had a light bulb about why it's not working, or they're looking at, how they can actually intellectually, they get it, of course, but how they can start that process?
If you're a business and you're in the typical seat of every other business, and I'd say it that way too, you are not doing anything at the moment that somebody else hasn't struggled through,
Mm.
or they like sat in a room just as much as you guys. So you're in good company, because a lot of businesses are in that spot. And you just have to kind of start, and you have to go back to basics, and you have to go back to logic. And you guys are going to know that, because the most intelligent individuals are in your company already. So like your own employees, your own leaders, you guys are going to know what is already not working, or already what somebody is doing very manually. Or if you don't, it's time to start listening and asking the questions. Hold sessions, hold educational sessions to uncover some of that, which is an early feedback loop to get your employees to understand that you are involving them. And whether you are or you're not talking about replacing them, as an employee, you can't really guard against that anyways. But as an employee, you should absolutely be experimenting all the time. And here's the great thing about AI, and I bring this up sometimes. You have the classic, like, my leader stole my idea and used it. Well, AI has all the logs, so they'll know who typed it in. So they'll know whose idea it is. So it's a great way for you to go ahead and experiment, see where that idea runs with and everything, and then show the company, like, show value, show ways that you can actually make a return on that investment. And if you start creating those feedback loops along the
Mm.
way, you create those channels, reward the employees who do those great things, like give them something, probably monetary, or something worthwhile that makes them want to keep producing that and keep bringing your return on investment just more and more. Those are the kind of things that can really help you in the end and really make it a really positive experience for you. And it can start with, I don't know how to do that. It can truly start there and come out positive. I've seen it.
Okay, super. Thank you. I'm going to leave our listeners thinking about that last sentence. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for coming and sharing your insights, your experience in such an honest and no BS way. That's exactly what I wanted. And, the operationalization of all these things we hear about, the hype, the adoption, the AI, the human in the loop, what does it mean? And so thank you very much for your honesty and sharing your stories. Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple things I'm working on that'll be coming out probably late this year. You can find and track me on LinkedIn. I post a lot on there all the time. I'm talking to people, I mentor people. Feel free to reach out and ask questions at any point in time. You can also find me at stellarhorn.com. That's where all my services are and where you can reach me for any business endeavors. And then you touched base on it earlier. I do the Decline Invite podcast. So if you like a lot of tech and business conversations and talking about really what's happening out there in those businesses, instead of those high, articles that we're seeing, the hype articles, you can come take a listen on there. We'd love to have you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for a great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
If you're listening and you're a leader staring at an AI rollout that feels stuck, or you're thinking, is that the right automation loop? Are we running the right projects? Is it the right use cases? I hope that what you take from this is permission to slow down and ask the basic, unglamorous questions first. Is our data even ready? Is it structured? Does anybody know which use cases we want to use? What human in the loop means for us? And what this change is asking of us, not just our tools. So you can find Ryan's podcast and his website in the notes, and you can also find the link to my website. As always, this is Let's Talk Transformation, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.